Okay, so I finished removing the wires, and again the backing's pretty secure. And since it's kind of an irregular hole, it's not a rectangular square, I'm just going to take a piece of paper, lay it over here, and just kind of gently kind of trace the hole. And I'll use this as my template for cutting out the drywall. If you have a square hole or a rectangle hole, you could just measure it out and cut it. But for my purposes, I'll just use this as my guide and cut out 2 drywall pieces that match this. Okay, so I made 2 little round drywall plugs here. Now, I would have much preferred to enlarge this hole into a square or rectangle, but the Lath and Plaster really makes that difficult. You can do it, but quite often you get into trouble. You know, you cut through a piece of lath and then you break off a piece. So if you can, just try to keep the original hole if it's at least symmetrical or a good size. If it's all irregular, then you'll have to cut out a more regular pattern. But in this case, I just made 2 little round little plugs, and I could either glue them in via a joint compound, or in this case I'm just going to add some Elmer's glue. That does a pretty good job, so I will add a liberal supply of glue, and I'll just put it so it goes all the way back to those backing boards like that. And then again with this second one, just a liberal supply, and then get them as far back as I can. And so here we go, and I'll let that just sit and go to the next step. Okay, so I let it dry. It's quite dry right now, and so the next step would be to apply the joint tape and the drywall tape and the drywall joint compound. Now I like to buy it in a bucket, or you know, a smaller, perhaps a quart size. You could also buy it in a powder form and mix it with water to the consistency you like, but I find it easier for such a small job just to buy a small little bucket. But before I do that, I'm going to use some steel wool. Because it's a pre-painted surface, I think this paint is probably either a satin or a semi-gloss. You want to texturize it just a little bit, since I'm going to be building up the joint compound all the way around it a while. So I'm just going to use steel wool to kind of texturize the wall a little bit and make sure that it at least has a little bit of texture, so when I apply the wall compound it will stick. You could also use some sandpaper if you don't have any steel wool. So I'm going to just kind of clean off the surface from any dust and go ahead and apply the tape. Okay, so I went ahead and cleaned off all the dust. I also have my joint tape, my drywall tape right here, and so I'm going to first rip off a piece of this about the right size that I want to apply. About this big. Actually, I'm going to rip off a couple pieces. And so I'm just going to apply the tape just like this. But first, I'm going to take some of my joint compound and just try to fill in all these holes as best I can. And then just apply my tape. And then pull. Try to keep all the air, as much air as you can, out of the tape. I'm going to apply there, and then go ahead and put the tape back on. Again, trying to remove all the excess air you can from underneath the tape. So right after I applied the tape, I did apply a thin coat of joint compound or mud, and I've let it dry, so it's nice and dry here. And now I'm just going to take 150 grit sandpaper. You could also use 100 grit sandpaper. I have a little block to help me sand, and just really lightly go over it to get a lot of the ridges off. You don't want to sand too much because you don't want to sand down to the tape. You just want to try to get the top a little bit smooth. So I got most of the rough spots off, and so I'm going to take actually a larger trowel. I originally used a smaller trowel, but now I'm going to use a larger trowel to get a much broader stroke and go over the original coat. And there, I'm done with the second coat. Don't mind the little ridge there, they'll be sanded away. And I'll let this dry and do one finish coat. And now for the last coat. So I'm just finishing up some of the sanding. It's getting really nice and smooth. So I went quite a bit away from the original hole, because when you build up the joint compound or the mud, it kind of makes a little bit of a mound, and you want to kind of taper the mound out so it will get the most smooth appearance. I probably went a little bit farther than I wanted to, but because the wall was slightly irregular, I just kind of wanted to make sure that I guarantee that smooth look. And I have the matching paint, so it shouldn't be a problem. But so there you have it. I hope this helped you out a bit. See you next time. Bye-bye.